People have always wanted answers to the big questions. Where did we come from? How did the universe begin? What is the meaning and design behind it all? Is there anyone out there? The creation accounts of the past now seem less relevant and credible. They've been replaced by a variety of what can only be called superstitions, ranging from New Age to Star Trek. But real science can be far stranger than science fiction, and much more satisfying. I'm a scientist, and a scientist with a deep fascination with physics, cosmology, the universe, and the future of humanity. I was brought up by my parents to have an unwavering curiosity, and, like my father, to research and try to answer the many questions that science asks us. I have spent my life traveling across the universe, inside my mind. Through theoretical physics, I have sought to answer some of the great questions. At one point, I thought I would see the end of physics as we know it, but now I think the wonder of discovery will continue long after I am gone. We are close to some of these answers, but we are not there yet. The problem is that most people believe that real science is too difficult and complicated for them to understand, but I don't think this is the case. To do research on the fundamental laws that govern the universe would require a commitment of time that most people don't have. The world would soon grind to a halt if we all tried to do theoretical physics. But most people can understand and appreciate the basic ideas if they are presented in a clear way without equations, which I believe is possible and which is something I've enjoyed trying to do throughout my life. It has been a glorious time to be alive and doing research in theoretical physics. Our picture of the universe has changed a great deal in the last 50 years, and I'm happy if I have made the contribution. One of the great revelations of the space age has been the perspective it has given humanity on ourselves. When we see the Earth from space, we see ourselves as a whole. We see the unity and not the divisions. It is such a simple image with a compelling message. One planet, one human race. I want to add my voice to those who demand immediate action on the key challenges for our global community. I hope that going forward, even when I am no longer here, people with power can show creativity, courage, and leadership. Let them rise to the challenge of the Sustainable Development Goals and act, not out of self-interest, but out of common interest. I'm very aware of the preciousness of time. Seize the moment, act now. I have written about my life before, but some of my early experiences are worth repeating as I think about my lifelong fascination with the big questions. I was born exactly 300 years after the death of Galileo, and I would like to think that this coincidence has had a bearing on how my scientific life has turned out. However, I estimate that about 200,000 other babies were also born that day. I don't know whether any of them were later interested in astronomy. I grew up in a tall, narrow Victorian house in Highgate, London, which my parents had bought very cheaply during the Second World War, when everyone thought London was going to be bombed flat. In fact, a V-2 rocket landed a few houses away from ours. I was away with my mother and sister at the time, and fortunately my father was not hurt. For years afterwards, there was a large bomb site down the road in which I used to play with my friend Howard. We investigated the results of the explosion with the same curiosity that drove me my whole life. In 1950, my father's place of work moved to the northern edge of London, to the newly constructed National Institute for Medical Research in Mill Hill, so my family relocated to the cathedral city of St Albans nearby. I was sent to the high school for girls, which, despite its name, took boys up to the age of 10. Later, I went to St Albans School. I was never more than about halfway up the class. It was a very bright class, but my classmates gave me the nickname Einstein, so presumably they saw signs of something better. When I was 12, one of my friends bet another friend a bag of sweets that I would never come to anything. I had 6 or 7 close friends in St Albans, and I remember having long discussions and arguments about everything, from radio-controlled models to religion. One of the big questions we discussed was the origin of the universe and whether it required a god to create it and set it going. I had heard that light from distant galaxies was shifted towards the red end of the spectrum, and this was supposed to indicate that the universe was expanding. But I was sure there must be some other reason for the red shift. Maybe light got tired and more red on its way to us. an essentially unchanging and everlasting universe seemed so much more natural. It was only years later, after the discovery of the cosmic microwave background, about 2 years into my PhD research, that I realized I had been wrong. I was always very interested in how things operated, and I used to take them apart to see how they worked, but I was not so good at putting them back together again. My practical abilities never matched up to my theoretical qualities. My father encouraged my interest in science and was very keen that I should go to Oxford or Cambridge. He himself had gone to University College, Oxford, so he thought I should apply there. At that time, University College had no fellow in mathematics, so I had little option but to try for a scholarship in natural science. I surprised myself by being successful. The prevailing attitude at Oxford at that time was very anti-work. You were supposed to be brilliant without effort, or to accept your limitations and get a fourth-class degree. I took this as an invitation to do very little. I'm not proud of this, I'm just describing my attitude at that time, shared by most of my fellow students. One result of my illness has been to change all that. When you are faced with the possibility of an early death, it makes you realize that there are lots of things you want to do before your life is over. Because of my lack of work, I had planned to get through the final exam by avoiding questions that required any factual knowledge, and focus instead on problems in theoretical physics. But I didn't sleep the night before the exam, and so I didn't do very well. I was on the borderline between a first and second class degree, and I had to be interviewed by the examiners to determine which I should get. In the interview, they asked me about my future plans. I replied that I wanted to do research. If they gave me a first, I would go to Cambridge. If I only got a second, I would stay in Oxford. They gave me a first. In the long vacation following my final exam, the college offered a number of small travel grants. I thought my chances of getting one would be greater the further I proposed to go, so I said I wanted to go to Iran. In the summer of 1962, I set out, taking a train to Istanbul, then on to Erzurum in eastern Turkey, then to Tabriz, Tehran, Isfahan, Shiraz, and Persepolis, the capital of the ancient Persian kings. On my way home, I and my travelling companion, Richard Chin, were caught in the Buin Zara earthquake, a massive 7.1 Richter quake that killed over 12,000 people. I must have been near the epicenter, but I was unaware of it because I was ill, and in a bus that was bouncing around on the Iranian roads that were then very uneven. We spent the next several days in Tabriz, where I recovered from severe dysentery and from a broken rib sustained on the bus when I was thrown against the seat in front, still not knowing of the disaster because we didn't speak Farsi.